The aftermath of a siege is chaos organized through exhaustion. Medical teams triaging wounded, engineers assessing structural damage, command staff running on stimulants and stubbornness. I'd been awake for 46 hours straight, coordinating defensive positions, managing resource allocation, trying to keep people alive while everything burned around us. We'd held. Barely. Outpost Kepler 9 was still standing, which was more than I'd thought possible 18 hours into the attack. We'd held because of her. Commander Charves of the Valier 3rd Legion, who'd arrived with her warriors when our distress signal reached their patrol route. Who'd fought beside us instead of just providing cover and leaving. Who'd saved dozens of human lives at significant risk to her own people. I'd watched her armor crack during the final push, plasma damage that should have sent her to medical immediately. She'd kept fighting anyway, holding a corridor while evacuating civilian personnel who couldn't defend themselves. That wasn't standard Valier doctrine. They were honorable warriors, but honor meant facing worthy opponents, not protecting the helpless. Charves had done it anyway. Now, 12 hours post-battle, my communication panel lit up with a priority message. Her request, not an order. Private meeting, observation deck, 2200 hours. I arrived early, still in combat fatigues, too tired to care about proper protocol. The observation deck was dim, station night cycle, with the gas giant we orbited filling half the viewport in bands of rust and amber. Charves entered exactly on time, and I was reminded why humans found Valier simultaneously impressive and intimidating. She was 7 feet tall in the armor that covered her from neck to boots, its surface marked with combat damage that maintenance teams hadn't yet repaired. The metal had an organic quality, like it had grown rather than been forged. Her face was bare, the helmet maglocked to her belt, and that was almost more imposing than the armor. Sharp features that might have been beautiful if they weren't so angular, skin with a metallic sheen like burnished copper. And her ears, rising into blade-like points that swept back from her skull, currently tilted in a position I'd learned meant formal attention. "Captain Rourke," she said, her voice carrying the harmonics that Valier voices always had, like multiple tones layered together. "Commander Charves, I managed something like proper military bearing. Thank you for meeting me." The gratitude should be reversed. Your tactical coordination enabled our forces to function as unified front rather than separate elements. She moved to stand at the viewport, her armor reflecting the gas giant's glow. "Valier tradition requires I acknowledge your contribution. I may offer reward within reasonable parameters, resources for rebuilding, tactical intelligence, formal alliance between Valier 3rd Legion and Kepler 9. It was generous. Any of those things would be invaluable for the station's recovery. But I was running on 46 hours of no sleep. My mental filters were completely destroyed, and what came out of my mouth was, "What do you want?" Her ears shifted to vertical, confusion or surprise. "I am offering you reward. Your desires are what matters in this exchange." "I heard you, I'm asking you." I turned to face her fully. "When was the last time someone asked you what you wanted? Not what military objectives demand, not what Valier tradition requires. What you actually want." She stared at me, those eyes that were too amber to be human processing, something she clearly hadn't expected. Her ears went through a series of positions too fast for me to read. She started, then stopped. "That question has no relevance to this situation." "Sure it does. You're here offering me something because tradition demands it. But you fought for us today, for me, for my people, when you didn't have to. You kept fighting when you were injured. You protected civilians when it wasn't strategically optimal." I was probably crossing about 15 lines of appropriate conduct. "So I'm asking, what do you want? What does Commander Charves want when she's not being a Valier warrior?" The silence stretched. Through the viewport, the gas giant storms rolled in patterns that had been repeating for millions of years. "I want." Her voice was quieter now, losing some of those layered harmonics. I want to understand you. This human who fights with strategy rather than strength, who protected injured instead of seeking glory, who sees me as. She hesitated, as something other than weapon. And you? I asked, my heart pounding for reasons that had nothing to do with combat fatigue. What is it you truly desire? I should have asked for tactical support, should have been professional, should have maintained the careful distance between allied forces from different species. Instead, the truth came out. You, I want you. Her ears went completely rigid, standing straight up from her head. The silence was absolute except for the station's ambient systems. Then, without a word, she reached up and began removing her armor. Wait, I started, panic flooding through exhaustion. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. Is this an insult? Did I violate some protocol? I just meant. She held up one hand, stopping me mid-ramble. I understand what you meant. Her voice was different without the armor's acoustic amplification, more vulnerable. And I am answering. The shoulder guards came off first, placed carefully on a nearby bench. Then the chest plate, revealing fitted underlayer that allowed movement beneath the armor. Her arms, her bracers, each piece removed with deliberate care. I realized this wasn't seduction. Or maybe it was, but not in any way I understood. This was something else, something significant. For Valier, she said quietly, removing the shin guards, armor is identity, status. The literal barrier between our warrior selves and everything else. We do not remove it casually. We do not remove it in front of others unless. She paused, straightening. Unless we trust them completely. She stood before me now in just the underlayer, something like fitted dark cloth that covered from neck to wrists to ankles. She looked different. Smaller without the armor's bulk, though still tall and clearly strong. Her ears were more expressive without the helmet framing them. Her skin's metallic sheen was fully visible, shifting slightly with her breathing. You asked what I wanted, she said. I want to understand what you see when you look at me. Because when I look at you, I see someone who fights for others rather than glory, who questions rather than assumes, who asked what I wanted when no one has asked me that in decades. She sat on the floor, a warrior without armor, cross-legged and looking up at me with something like uncertainty. Will you sit with me? She asked. Will you help me understand? I sat, carefully leaving respectful distance between us, and wondered what the hell I just started. We talked through the station's entire night cycle. She asked questions about the battle, not tactical analysis, but why I'd made certain choices. Why I'd prioritized evacuating civilians over holding defensive positions. Why I'd risked soldiers to recover wounded instead of maintaining offensive pressure. I explained human military philosophy, about proportional response and rules of engagement, and the importance of protecting those who can't protect themselves. How winning isn't just about defeating enemies but preserving what you're fighting for. She listened with her ears tilted forward in complete focus, occasionally asking for clarification when human concepts didn't map cleanly to Valier thinking. Then I asked about her, about Valier culture, about what it meant to be a warrior in her society. We are created for combat, she said, her voice carrying pride and something else I couldn't identify. Selected at youth for physical aptitude, trained from childhood, refined over decades. Warriors are revered in Valier culture. We are honored, celebrated, given authority and resources. But, I prompted, hearing something unspoken. Her ears tilted back. A position I was learning meant discomfort or uncertainty. But we are also isolated, expected to be strong without question, to never show vulnerability, to prioritize victory over all other considerations. Warriors don't have. She struggled for the word, attachments. We have battle bonds with our units, hierarchical respect for our commanders, professional relationships with support personnel. But personal connections, intimacy, friendship for its own sake, these are viewed as weaknesses that compromise tactical judgment. That sounds lonely. Yes, the word was quiet. I have been a warrior for 30 years. Celebrated and alone. My entire existence is combat and the spaces between combat. I am Commander Sharvis, legendary fighter, tactical asset. No one approaches me as simply Sharvis. No one asks what I want. Until today. Until you asked, and I didn't know how to answer because I've stopped thinking in those terms. She looked at me directly. You saw me injured during the battle, my armor damaged, my combat effectiveness compromised. You thought that was strength. I saw you protecting others despite being hurt. Yes, that's strength. Valor would call that failure, unable to maintain defensive capability while engaging threats. Humans would call it heroism, prioritizing others over yourself, continuing despite personal cost. That's basically the definition. She processed this, her ears cycling through several positions. Your species is strange. Your species is lonely. It was probably too bold, too direct, but she didn't contradict it. Instead, she said quietly, yes, valor culture creates exceptional warriors and isolates them. Excellence means distance. No one wants to be friends with the person who could kill them accidentally. No one attempts intimacy with someone who might be deployed anywhere in the sector at any time. Until me. Until you asked what I wanted. Not what valor military objectives require, not what tradition demands, what I wanted. She shifted slightly closer, and I wanted this. Conversation without calculation, someone seeing me rather than my reputation. Understanding that removing armor doesn't mean weakness, it means trust. You trust me. The question came out rougher than intended. You saw me vulnerable today, armor damaged, protecting civilians instead of engaging optimally. You didn't view it as failure, you called it heroism. Her ears tilted forward. Yes, I trust you, enough to sit here without armor, which I have not done with another person in. I don't remember how long. She extended a hand across the space between us. I stared at it for a moment. This gesture from an alien warrior who'd removed literal and metaphorical armor, then took it. Her skin was warm despite its metallic appearance, her grip strong but carefully controlled. Our hands looked strange together, hers larger and different, mine pale against her copper tone. I don't know what this is, she admitted. Valor don't have frameworks for this kind of connection. We have battle bonds, alliances, formal relationships defined by military structure. But this, curiosity about another person for their own sake, this is unfamiliar territory. Humans would call it friendship, maybe the beginning of something more. Something more. Her ears tilted with uncertainty. If both people want it, if it develops naturally, if... She kissed me. It was awkward, different mouth structures, her teeth sharper than human standard, neither of us quite sure about pressure or angle or what this meant in each other's cultures. But it was genuine, intentional. When she pulled back, her skin had changed slightly, a warmth to the metallic sheen that hadn't been there before. I want it, she said. This something more, with you, if you'll teach me how humans build these connections. My brain struggled to catch up with what was happening. You're serious. Valor don't joke about desires. When we want something, we pursue it directly. Her hand tightened slightly on mine. I want to understand you. Want to explore this connection. Want. She paused, searching for words. Want to know what it feels like to remove armor with someone and not have it mean surrender. It doesn't mean surrender, I managed. It means trust. Being vulnerable with someone you believe won't hurt you. Teach me, she said. Teach me how to trust like that. So I did, or started to. We talked through the rest of the night about human approaches to relationships, about vulnerability as strength, about the difference between being alone and being lonely. I told her about my own struggles with connection, the difficulty of command, the isolation of responsibility, the fear that getting close to people means risking more pain when inevitably they're hurt or killed. She listened to all of it, her ears in constant motion as she processed these alien concepts. When Station Dawn Cycle began lighting the viewport, she stood and began putting her armor back on. You're leaving? I asked, trying not to sound disappointed. I must return to my ship, manage post-battle procedures. She fastened the chest plate. But Ethan, first time she'd used my name without rank, I will return. Tonight, same time. If you want me to. I want you to. She smiled, a small expression that transformed her sharp features into something softer. Good, because I find I want to continue this conversation, this connection, this, us. She left fully armored again, the commander everyone expected, but I'd seen what was underneath, and I couldn't unsee it. I returned to my quarters, collapsed into my bunk, and slept for 10 hours straight. When I woke, there was a message waiting. Tonight, I'll bring food from my ship. Your species should try Valier cuisine. S. I smiled at my datapad like an idiot and started counting hours until evening. The following weeks developed a rhythm. Jarvis would arrive each evening in full armor, formal and commanding. We'd talk for a few minutes with that distance maintained. Then she'd remove the armor piece by piece, the ritual becoming our private language. Her way of saying, I trust you, I'm choosing vulnerability, I'm present as Jarvis rather than commander. We learned each other through conversation and careful exploration. I discovered that her ears were extremely sensitive, responding to touch with what seemed like pleasure mixed with surprise. She learned that humans needed more verbal communication than Valier, that our emotions weren't always visible on our faces. She told me about her life, daughter of legendary warriors, trained from age 6, never allowed to be anything except the best. Every victory increased expectations. Every display of strength created more distance between her and potential connection. She'd been lonely for so long she'd stopped recognizing it as loneliness, just accepted it as the cost of excellence. I told her about human struggles with command, about imposter syndrome and survivor's guilt and the weight of responsibility, about how I questioned every decision, wondered if I could have saved more people, doubted whether I deserved the rank I held. You doubt yourself. She seemed genuinely surprised, but you led the defense successfully. And I second-guess every choice, wonder if different decisions would have meant fewer casualties. That would be seen as weakness among Valier. Commanders must project absolute certainty. Humans see it differently. Doubting means you care, that you're taking responsibility seriously. It's only weakness if it paralyzes you. She processed this, her ears tilting thoughtfully. Your species turns vulnerability into strength somehow. It's paradoxical. Your species turns strength into isolation. That's equally paradoxical. She couldn't argue with that. We navigated physical intimacy carefully, learning the differences in our biologies. Her metallic skin was sensitive in unexpected places, the base of her ears, the hollow of her throat, the inside of her wrists. She was significantly stronger than humans, had to be conscious of her grip, careful with movements that would be casual for Valier but overwhelming for me. I learned to read her ears like a second language. Forward tilt meant focus or curiosity, back meant discomfort. Flat against her head meant fear or intense emotion. Rotating in circles meant she was processing something complex. The subtle variations created entire vocabularies of expression. We created our own communication, part verbal, part physical, part intuitive understanding built through attention and care. I stared at her standing in the doorway in just the underlayer, vulnerable from the moment she appeared. I didn't want to waste time with the ritual tonight, she explained, entering and sitting in what had become her spot. We have limited evenings left. I want to spend them as myself, not as the commander. We sat together in silence for a while, holding hands, watching the gas giant storms. I've never had something I didn't want to lose before, she said eventually. Warriors don't fear death, we fear failure. But this losing you, that terrifies me in ways combat never has. So we figure it out. Find a way to make it work. How? I have duties to my people. You have responsibilities here. There's no compromise that serves both. Then we create a new option. Build something that doesn't exist yet. She turned to look at me, her ears tilting forward with desperate hope. You fight even when victory seems impossible. Humans don't give up on things we care about. Sometimes that's stupid. Sometimes it works. And this, us. You're not giving up. Not unless you want me to. Her hand tightened on mine. I don't want you to give up. I want to understand how to build something lasting when everything in my training says attachments are weaknesses to be eliminated. Maybe start by acknowledging your training was wrong about some things. She laughed, rare and precious sound. You're asking me to question 3 decades of cultural conditioning. I'm asking you to consider that maybe connection makes you stronger, not weaker. That having something to fight for is more effective than just fighting against things. She pulled me close, her arms careful despite their strength. Show me. Show me how humans build lasting connections. I'll try to learn. So we spent the remaining time together, not hiding from the approaching separation, but not letting it poison what we had. She taught me valor meditation techniques, methods warriors use to center themselves before combat. I introduced her to human music, watching her ears tilt and rotate as she processed melodies our species had created. We talked about futures, hypothetical scenarios where distance didn't matter, where our species had better relations, where individuals could choose their paths without military obligations dictating everything. If I could choose, she said one evening, I would stay here, with you, build whatever this is without clock running. If I could choose, I'd go with you. Learn about valor culture firsthand, see your world. Neither is possible. Not yet, but maybe someday. She wanted to believe it. I could see it in the position of her ears, the way she held me a little tighter. The final evening arrived too fast. Her ship would depart the next morning. We sat in the observation deck, her armor stacked nearby, neither of us wanting to acknowledge what came next. I spoke with my command, she said eventually. Requested extended assignment as liaison to human forces in this sector. They denied it. Said my skills are needed elsewhere, that attachment to single locations, or individuals, compromises tactical flexibility. I requested transfer to diplomatic corps, I responded. Thought maybe I could work on valor human relations, find excuse to visit your territory. Also denied. Apparently tactical experience is too valuable to waste on diplomacy. We sat in frustrated silence. This is why valor avoid attachments, she said quietly. The pain of separation is significant. Humans avoid it too sometimes, but we've decided the connection is worth the pain. Is it worth the pain? I looked at her, this warrior who'd learned to be vulnerable, who'd removed armor physically and emotionally, who'd become my closest friend and partner in a few intense weeks. Yes, absolutely yes. Even if this is all we get, it was worth it. Her ears drooped with grief she wasn't used to expressing. I don't want this to be all we get. Then we fight for more. Figure out how to make it work across the distance. Long-distance relationships fail statistically. Statistics don't account for stubborn humans and warriors who don't know how to quit. She almost smiled, then pulled me close. We stayed like that until station dawn, holding each other, neither wanting to be the first to let go. But eventually, duty called, and we had to face the goodbye neither of us wanted. The docking bay was organized chaos, valor warriors loading equipment, human personnel seeing them off, command staff exchanging formal farewells. I stood in the middle of it all, watching Charves coordinate her forces with the efficiency that made her legendary. She was in full armor, every piece in place, the commander that everyone expected. Her ears were carefully neutral, expressing nothing personal despite everything happening inside. She approached me finally, formal and distant, every inch the professional officer. Captain Rourke. The Valor 3rd Legion appreciates Kepler 9's cooperation during the recent crisis. Your tactical coordination was exemplary. Commander Charves, your forces saved countless lives. We're in your debt. The formal words hung between us like barriers, and I wanted to tear them all down. Her communication device beeped, 5 minutes to departure. This was it. Instead of the goodbye I expected, Sharvis did something I'd never seen a Valier warrior do. She dropped to one knee, a formal position I recognized from my research. It was the stance warriors took when pledging loyalty to a cause greater than themselves. The bay went silent. Every eye turned toward us. "I don't have human words for this," she said, her voice carrying across the space. "But Valier have oaths. Bonds that transcend distance and time. Warriors pledged to causes, to comrades, to purposes worth dying for." She looked up at me, and her ears were tilted forward with absolute focus despite the audience. "I pledge to you, Ethan Rourke, to finding a way across the distance, to creating something new that our species haven't built before, to refusing to accept that separation means ending." Everyone was staring now. Her warriors looked shocked. My command staff looked bewildered. This was incredibly public for something so deeply personal. "You don't have to," I started. "I do, because you asked what I wanted and I want this. Want you. Want whatever we can build together." She stood, her voice dropping to something only I could hear. "Say you want it too. Say you'll fight for this as hard as you fought for this station." I could have played it safe. Could have accepted the goodbye with dignity, let her leave without making promises we might not keep. Instead, I took her hand in front of everyone. "I want it. I want you. I'll fight for this with everything I have." She kissed me, public, unmistakable, a declaration to both our peoples that this connection mattered more than propriety or protocol or what anyone else thought. When we broke apart, her second-in-command looked scandalized, and my XO looked shocked, but neither of us cared. "I'll find a way back," she promised. "I'll find a way to you," I countered. She boarded her ship and I watched it depart, feeling the distance open between us like a wound. But it wasn't an ending. The following months were difficult. Communication was complicated. Time delays, encrypted channels, messages that took days to send and receive. But we managed. She told me about Valier politics, about the controversy her public pledge had created. Some called it weakness. Others were intrigued by this human concept that connection might strengthen rather than compromise. I told her about rebuilding efforts, about how our relationship had become a talking point in diplomatic circles. Some saw it as proof of cross-species cooperation. Others worried about personal feelings compromising professional judgment. We didn't care about the criticism. We just kept communicating, kept building whatever this was across impossible distance. 4 months after her departure, she sent a message with a single attached file, "New orders." I opened it with shaking hands. Permanent assignment, liaison officer, Kepler 9, establishing long-term Valier presence in human space. Unprecedented posting, departure in 2 weeks, see you soon, S. I read it 3 times to make sure I wasn't hallucinating from sleep deprivation. She'd found a way back. 2 weeks later, her ship docked and I was waiting in the bay. She disembarked in full armor, formal and commanding, every inch the legendary warrior. Our eyes met across the distance. Then she reached up and removed her helmet, her ears tilting forward with unmistakable joy. "I told you I'd find a way back," she said. "I told you I'd wait." She crossed the bay, and when we embraced, it wasn't goodbye anymore. It was the beginning of figuring out what we were building. This relationship between warrior and tactician, between species that approached strength differently, between 2 people who'd refused to accept that distance meant ending. Over the following months, we built our life together. She established the liaison office, creating formal frameworks for Valier-human cooperation. I continued my tactical work, now coordinating regularly with her forces. We maintained separate quarters officially. Military regulations required it. But unofficially, she spent most nights in my space, armor stored in the corner, vulnerable and present. We still had arguments, cultural differences creating friction, misunderstandings that needed patient resolution. But we worked through them, building communication strategies that bridged the gap between our species' different approaches. One evening, 6 months after her permanent posting, we sat in our observation deck. It had become ours, rather than just a meeting place. She'd arrived in casual clothes rather than armor or underlayer, a development that had taken months. Valier wearing non-military attire was rare, but she'd been learning human approaches to off-duty existence. "What do you want?" I asked, echoing that first conversation. She smiled, easier now, more frequent than when we'd started. "This, exactly this. You, me, building something neither of our species has built before. Think we can make it work, long term?" "I don't know, but I'm willing to find out." She took my hand, skin warm against mine. "After all, you taught me that fighting for something you want, even when victory seems impossible, is what humans do best. And you taught me that removing armor, being vulnerable with someone you trust, is its own kind of strength." Her ears tilted forward with affection. "We make good teachers for each other. We make a good team." "Yes, we do." She leaned against me, comfortable in a way that would have been impossible when we first met. "I'm glad you asked what I wanted. I'm glad I was brave enough to answer. I'm glad you removed your armor. It was terrifying, still is sometimes, being seen completely, trusting someone with vulnerability." She looked at me. "But you've never used that trust as weakness, never exploited it. You just appreciated it, met it with your own vulnerability. That's what humans do. We show our soft parts to people we trust and hope they're careful with them. It's a good system, terrifying but good." We sat together watching the stars, two people from different worlds who'd created something new. It wasn't perfect. We still stumbled over differences, still had moments of frustration when our species' approaches clashed. But it was ours, built on a foundation of honesty, vulnerability, and the simple act of asking, "What do you want?" and being brave enough to answer truthfully. A year after her permanent posting, Valier Command asked her to document her experience for other warriors considering human postings. She wrote a report that was clinical and professional, detailing cooperation strategies and cultural translation methods. But she also wrote something else, a personal account that she shared only with me and a few select others. In it, she described what it meant to remove armor, to be vulnerable, to build connection across species lines. "Humans taught me," she wrote, "that strength includes knowing what's worth fighting for beyond just victory. That protecting something you care about makes you more effective, not less. That removing armor, literal or metaphorical, isn't surrender. It's trust, which is its own form of courage." The account spread through Valier circles, quietly shared among younger warriors curious about alternatives to traditional isolation. It didn't change everything, but it started conversations, planted seeds that maybe connection wasn't weakness. 2 years in, we made it official, formal partnership registration, recognized by both human and Valier authorities. The ceremony was small, just close friends and colleagues. She wore dress armor, I wore formal uniform. We pledged to each other in both languages, promising to keep choosing each other despite complications. At the reception after, my XO pulled me aside. "You know this is insane, right? Cross-species relationships are statistically. I know the statistics, I don't care. You're both making your lives more complicated for each other, for building something neither of our species had built before, for proving that connection can bridge differences." I looked across the room where Charves was talking with her second-in-command, her ears animated and expressive. "For love, Commander. I'm making my life complicated for love." He shook his head, but he was smiling. "You're either the bravest or stupidest officer I've ever served with." "Probably both." That evening in our shared quarters, Charves removed her dress armor piece by piece. The ritual that had started as vulnerability had become comfort, routine, the physical expression of coming home. "What do you want?" she asked, echoing that first question. I pulled her close, her skin warm, her presence solid and real. "This, you, every day, every challenge, every moment we build together." "Good," she said, her ears wrapping partially around my